Russian President Vladimir Putin held a meeting with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping where they signed several strategic cooperation agreements. Black smoke rose on the second day of the conclave as no consensus has been reached while the world awaits for another vote round. And Argentina's Senate rejected the clean sheet bill, which sought to prohibit persons convicted of crimes against public administration from running for elective office. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos. I'm from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. We now begin with the information. Russian President Vladimir Putin held a meeting with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping where they signed several strategic cooperation agreements. At the reunion, the Russian head of state assured that Moscow and Beijing remain staunch defenders of the historic truth and remember the countless people their countries lost during World War II, stressing that the sacrifices that both their nations made should never be forgotten. In echoing remarks, Xi highlighted the need for the continuous development of the countries' bilateral relations. For this, following their talks, Putin and Xi signed a joint statement on further strengthening their comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction in the new era. And also as part of the 80th anniversary of the Soviet victory over Nazism and fascism, the presidents of Venezuela and Cuba laid wreath at the Simón Bolívar Monument in Moscow. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, together with his Cuban counterpart Miguel Díaz-Canel, were received by Venezuelan students at the site where they placed a wreath at the statue of the liberator Simón Bolívar in the Russian capital. The monument, inaugurated in the year 2023, represents the culmination of one of the projects of Commander Hugo Rafael Chávez Frías, who in one of his last visits to the country placed the first stone of a project that would seal the alliance of both nations.
The heroic people liberating Europe, liberating the Jewish people, liberated humanity. That is the truth. The triumph belongs to them yesterday and the triumph belongs to them today. And the triumph will belong to them forever. That is why we have to come.
We stay in Russia as Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro met with Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov in order to strengthen bilateral relations amid the celebration of Victory Day. Through his social networks, the Venezuelan president informed, after a successful working day, I met with Kadyrov Ramzan, head of the Republic of Chechnya, in an effort to consolidate the bonds of brotherhood. With this meeting, Bolivar's homeland ratified its commitment to promote brotherhood among peoples in order to continue together in defense of self-determination and the Bolivarian diplomacy of peace. And world leaders continue to arrive in Moscow ahead of Victory Day celebrations to be held on May 9th. In this case, interim military president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, also arrived to the Russian capital. The Burkina leader arrived in Moscow on Thursday to take part in the commemorations and also strengthening his nation's growing ties with the Russian Federation, a key alliance in the Sahel's anti-colonialist project. And in an act of Russophobia, Estonia and other Baltic countries decided to ban the use of their airspace by world leaders attending the Victory Day parade. The flight of presidents of Cuba and Brazil, Miguel Díaz-Canel and Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, among others, were affected because Estonia and other Baltic nations prevented the passage of aircrafts heading Moscow. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov described such action as a disgraceful way to deprive of all rights those who defend historical memory together with Russia. According to analysts, the measure seeks to impose a narrative of an isolated Russia. We stay in Russia. President Vladimir Putin announced a 3-day ceasefire on the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War against Nazi Germany. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov assured that this measure will begin on May 8th and will last until May 11th. This decision has a humanitarian character and is aimed at allowing the exchange of prisoners and the evacuation of civilians in conflict zones. Peskov warned that Russia will respond forcefully to any provocation or violation of the ceasefire by the Ukrainian armed forces. Victory Day is one of the most symbolic events in Russia, where there will be commemorative acts, marches, and as a main tradition, the military parade where troops and modern war equipment will be exhibited. Now we have a short break coming up, but first, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In the Vatican City, black smoke rose again on the second day of the conclave, signaling that no consensus has been reached as 2 more rounds of voting are scheduled as of 4:30 p.m. local time. After the first 2 rounds of the day, a plume of black smoke rose over the crowds gathered in St. Peter's Square, signaling that the conclave's voting has not secured the required 2/3 majority to elect a successor to the late Pope Francis. Tens of thousands of pilgrims and tourists gathered once again to witness this historic event. The cardinals are tasked not just for the selection of a new leader, but with choosing a path forward and a role for the Catholic Church in the complex global scenario. If they do not reach a conclusive decision on Thursday afternoon, voting will continue on Friday with 4 more voting sessions. And with the conclave underway at the Sistine Chapel, let's review the origins of the 133 cardinals participating in the election process.
Out of a total 252 cardinals, only 133 can participate in the election of the Pope. Of these, 51 cardinals are of European origin, 37 from the Americas, 23 from Asia, 18 from Africa, and 4 from Oceania. The youngest is the Australian Mikola Bishop, 45 years old, and the oldest is the Spaniard Carlos Osoro Sierra, 79 years old. For the first time, 12 nations with native electors are represented in the Sistine Chapel: Haiti, Cape Verde, Papua New Guinea, Sweden, Luxembourg, and South Sudan.
We continue with other topics. In Palestine, the number of people killed by the attacks of the Israeli occupation reached 52,653, while the number of wounded reached 118,897. In the last 24 hours alone, the Zionist military operations have resulted in the death of 38 Palestinians, injuring another 145. This Wednesday, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz announced that his army will expand its military operations in Gaza, forcing the enclave's population to relocate to a confined area in the south. Katz also added that the Israeli troops would remain in all areas they capture, indicating that they will not withdraw even if a new ceasefire agreement was reached with Hamas. Meanwhile, in Yemen, the Ansarullah movement stated that the recent ceasefire negotiated with the United States does not limit its operations against Israel. The announcement was made after Israeli planes attacked the Sanaa airport in the capital of the country. Houthi leader Mahdi al-Mashat said that responses against Israel would continue. Oman's foreign minister, who is in charge of the negotiations, hailed the breakthrough as a milestone towards de-escalation. The Houthis reaffirmed that their support for Palestine will continue through actions against Israel-associated interests. Thus, in an unstable context, the Ansarullah movement will continue to attack ships linked to Israel and Western powers as part of its support for the Palestinian cause. And the United Nations World Food Programme expressed concern over drone attacks on the port of Sudan, making it difficult to distribute food across the country. A military source revealed that on Wednesday, the Sudanese armed forces intervened in a drone attack on the country's largest naval base, Port Sudan, the fourth day of consecutive attacks. Recently, the Sudanese forces have intensified drone attacks on military infrastructure. In this regard, Stephanie Tremblay, Assistant Secretary General of the UN, stated that the Red Sea port is a crucial access for aid, so the constant siege makes the work of humanitarian personnel more difficult. Recently, the Sudan Defense Forces have intensified drone attacks on military and critical infrastructure in areas controlled by the Sudanese armed forces. In the United States, the new Delaney Hall Migrant Detention Center in Newark, New Jersey, has been the target of protests by activists opposed to Donald Trump's immigration policies. Outside the prison, protesters questioned its operation, especially due to the lack of evidence of approval by local authorities. On the other hand, the mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, expressed his concern by pointing out that the jail is operating at the cost of non-compliance with the necessary regulations and licenses. In this context, the local government has issued 3 citations against the prison administration of the facility, including one that denounces the refusal to allow the mayor to enter. Honduras reinforced surveillance in some sectors of the capital after the U.S. Embassy warned of a possible threat of a mass shooting. The U.S. delegation said that it received information about a possible shooting threat in 3 places in Tegucigalpa, among them a school. President Xiomara Castro criticized in a speech this Wednesday the message of the embassy, saying that it generates anxiety, affirming that in Honduras they live in peace. The police, in a statement, assured that they have received multiple warnings about a possible attack, such as the placement of explosive devices with the purpose of provoking chaos and destabilization, and preventive actions were activated. We have a second short break coming up, but before, we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverages, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Argentina's Senate rejected the clean sheet bill, which sought to prohibit persons convicted of crimes against public administration from running for elective office. The policy is a strategy of the government of Javier Milei not to allow the return of former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. With 36 votes in favor and 35 against, the Senate did not reach the necessary majority, which represents a defeat to the persecution against former President Fernández de Kirchner. The decision may not be dealt with again until 2026. The governor of the province of Buenos Aires, Axel Kicillof, described the bill that the Senate tried to convert into law this afternoon as very serious against democracy. Also in Argentina, photographer Pablo Grillo is recovering after 50 days in intensive care due to injuries sustained during police repression of the protest against the government of Javier Milei. The medical report indicates that Pablo Grillo is showing progressive improvements. Likewise, health authorities detailed that due to the seriousness of his injuries, Grillo would need a cranial prosthesis. Meanwhile, the court case led by Argentine Judge Maria Servini identified police officer Hector Guerrero as the person allegedly responsible for the shooting. On the other hand, several social organizations are demanding the resignation of the Minister of the Interior and Security, Patricia Bullrich, for the brutal repressive operation against the Argentinian society on March 12th. The premiere of the Netflix series The Eternaut has led to the reactivation of the search for the grandchildren of Héctor Germán Oesterheld, creator of the original work on which the production was based. Oesterheld's 4 daughters were kidnapped during the last civic military dictatorship in Argentina between 1976 and 1983, and 2 of them were pregnant. The National Network of Sons and Daughters for Identity and Justice Against Oblivion and Silence, HIJOS, started a campaign in search of a survivor, taking advantage of the popularity of the series. The original version of The Eternaut was a graphic novel first published in the 1950s as a comic book. The graphic novel is remembered for fostering the idea of a collective hero for the first time and its iconic phrase, "No one is saved alone." In other news, in Peru, demonstrators take to the streets to protest over the death of Radio La Caribeña journalist at the hands of alleged hitmen in the Amazon city of Iquitos. 70-year-old journalist Raúl Celis López was murdered on his way to work on board of a motorcycle cab at around 5:30 a.m. This is the second murder of a Peruvian journalist so far in 2025, according to the National Association of Journalists. The people of Iquitos mobilized to demand justice for the murder of the journalist, who received death threats after denouncing land trafficking in his program. The protest took place at the headquarters of the police and the judiciary in rejection of the growing wave of violence in the city of Loreto. And in Venezuela, the Minister of the Interior and Justice, Diosdado Cabello, denounced the disorganization of Donald Trump's administration for the deportation of migrants through the planned return to the homeland. Diosdado Cabello confirmed the arrival of the aircraft from Honduras, which landed in Venezuelan territory with only 71 returnees, when initially the U.S. authorities had announced the transfer of 170 nationals. He also pointed out that among the 71 nationals were 62 men and 9 women, also indicating that no minors were on board. With this, 19 flights of the Return to the Homeland plan have returned since January with more than 7,000 Venezuelan migrants. And in Ecuador, residents of the native community of Salango demanded justice on Wednesday in the case of the sale of beaches over which they have ancestral rights. The Salango community argues that the Ecuadorian government ignored their community rights by allowing the illegal sale and appropriation of approximately 84 acres of land in 2000 to a real estate company managed by a Swiss national. Community members argue that the sale has restricted access to the natural resources that have historically sustained their economy and cultural identity. Next May 20th, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights will hold a public hearing to address the case. Moving on to sports, the International Federation of Association Football, FIFA, announced on Wednesday the 8 cities and the respective stadiums that will host the 2027 Women's World Cup in Brazil, the first one to take place in Latin America. Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Brasilia, Belo Horizonte, Porto Alegre, Salvador, Fortaleza, and Recife are the venues chosen for the tournament to be played in a country that has never won the Women's World Cup. According to the president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino, the world will experience the energy, color, and human warmth that only Brazil can offer. The World Cup will be played for the second time with 32 teams, a format inaugurated in the 2023 edition that brings the women's tournament on a par with the number historically used in the men's edition. Mexico City is preparing to welcome more than 5 million visitors for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Soccer top event will be held in Mexico, the United States, and Canada, marking the first time that the three countries will co-host the event. 3 of the 16 venues will be in the Latin American nation, with the central city of Guadalajara and the Northern Industrial Center of Monterrey sharing hosting duties with Mexico's capital. More than 5 million people are expected to arrive for the games in Mexico City, which has around 9 million residents and is more than 2,200 meters above sea level. Organizers called for a World Cup free of homophobia, racism, and other attacks on civil liberties. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and also on TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.